record. All right, so we're ready to go to introduce Frédéric and start talking before jumping into vintage 2020. Frédéric, can you give us a little bit of background on Bouchard Père et Fils?
Yeah. Bonjour à tous. I'm very happy to be with you today. It's an evening for me in France. It was a very sunny and hot day, incredible for the month of May. Now we will speak about the 2020 vintage. That was a really challenging vintage for us. It's certainly today the warmest vintage we had for the last century. Very hot, 1.7 degrees plus than usual. Dry vintage. The nature suffer a lot of the dryness of the drought. 40% less of rain, and a very sunny vintage too. In totally, we had 300 hours of sun more than usual. And finally, it's a very exceptional vintage. If you analyze this vintage, the winter was very warm. That's why the bird breaks appear 1 month sooner than usual. That's never happened. And for my team, it was very unusual. We were starting to debirding in the beginning of April. And yes, we never see that, but we adapt our method in the vineyard with the global warming. And after that, the spring was very beautiful, sunny, dry, perfect period for the flowering period. There is no stress during the flowering period. That was nice. And the summer was hot and dry. And finally, we have to start the harvest the 19 August, and that's the first time in the history of Bouchard since the beginning of the estate in 1731. We never harvest so sooner than with 2020, and. But we have to adapt our method, and for this vintage, we harvest only early morning to respect the fruit and the purity of the fruit. After that, we put the fruit on the big fridge to decrease the temperature. On 1 day later, we could select the grapes and to recover a normal style for the vinification. Another main fact in 2020, it was the presence of the north wind, and the north wind dried, increased the drought, and especially for the Pinot Noir. That's why it was very important to starting the harvest with the Pinot Noir, and I wait a little more for the Chardonnay. Because the Pinot Noir globally suffer a little more of the drought, and it was very important to start the harvest and to pick the grapes at the beginning, since the 19 August to the 25 August, to select the grapes, to eliminate the dried fruit, and to recover a good purity. After that, for the vinification for the Pinot Noir, it's a little more classic. I just increase the proportion of whole cluster. In average, it's 30% for the Côte de Beaune, 50% for the Côte de Nuit, just to have more freshness and to avoid over maturity taste, port taste. And but the skin was so thick, so rich in color. The tannin was very present in 20. That's why it's a very soft maceration with 10, 12 days maximum. It's like an infusion, like a tea. No remontage, no racking over, no pigeage, nothing. We just wait carefully, and when the terroir, the wine appear, we're racking it, and I put it in barrel. because it was very important for this vintage to, yes, to respect the fruit, to search the purity, a beautiful expression of the terroir without dry fruit taste, without a port taste. And finally, 2020 for the red wine, I'm really happy today. It needs a long time of aging in barrel, but I'm sure you will see it's a huge vintage. Firstly, for the color, certainly you never see that. And for me, it remember me the 1929 vintage from the collection of Bouchard, because this vintage, it's incredible when you taste it. It's a black color after 80 years. But 2020, it's exactly the same. Very beautiful color, a lot of black fruit aroma, and a beautiful acidity. And I think the aging potential for the 2020 will be just huge. For the collector, it will be the vintage. This vintage need a little more time to age in barrel, to have more to soft the tannin. And now I just since 1 month I starting to racking it and to prepare the wine for the bottling. And I would like to finish the bottling 2020 for the next few weeks. Certainly at the end of July, I finished to bottling all the red wine. If you would like to compare with the most recent vintage, you could compare with 05. And you could imagine the quality of 2020 for the red wine.
So I know the acidity, you mentioned that. I mean, the freshness is absolutely astonishing. This is what comes across.
There was a lot of acidity, mainly from the tartaric acid, because there is of the drought and the north wind, and concentrate the berries and decrease the quantity of water. And it's a high maturity, but also with a great concentration.
So how did you, in the vineyards, I mean, what did you do to avoid the scorching and damages from the heat?
It was important to eliminate the weeds in the vineyard, and we cultivate, we plug more the soils to reduce the concurrence of water with the vine. We keep the leaves to protect the bunches from against the sun, and after that we pick early to respect the good balance and the purity of the fruit.
And you didn't de-leaf, I believe that's correct?
You what?
You didn't de-leaf, you maximize the canopy's ability to protect the grapes as well, correct?
Okay. Yeah.
Did you need to do a lot of sorting when you once the grapes were harvested?
No, that's why because we started earlier, because the maturity was there, and I think it was important to start very sooner than usual, and that's why we decided to pick in 19 August, because for me, when I taste the berries, the maturity was there. And after that, I just to sort the berries, just to eliminate some very dried berries, perhaps 1-2%, to avoid a port taste, and that was important. Yeah.
Great. All right, thank you, Frédéric. Shall we jump into the wines, and starting with Bonne Premier Cru, Letteron, and Marconnet. So let me pull up a map. So you can just start talking about the terroir of, so Letteron is in the middle of the map, and les Marconnets on the right.
Yes, exactly. Alors, les Terrons and les Marconnets, it's an historical terroir for Bouchard Père et Fils. And after the Beaune Grève and Claude Lamousse, because it's our monopoly, but Terron and Marconnet, it's very famous Premier Cru. It's certainly the most famous Premier Cru after the Grève. And if you look the book of le Dr Laval, it was classified as première classe because it's very well known. Alors, Letteron and Marconnet, it's very two different style of wine. Letteron, you are in the middle of the côte. It's east facing. You have a beautiful slope. a gentle slope. But the terroir, it's really different from the other part because of the richness. It's really a lime. There is a lot of limestone, a lot of white stone, and the maturity in this place arrives very sooner than the other parts of the estate. That's why every year I'm starting the harvest with the Laiteron for the in the Beaune area. And for me, Laiteron, personally, I love this terroir. It's certainly the most racy wine for the Pinot lover. Every vintage, you have a lot of delicacy. It's a very complexity on the nose with roses on the peony, a lot of taste of gem fruits. But the delicacy of the tannin, it's astonishing. And personally, I love Laiteron, and certainly it's one of the aging potential. Laiteron, it's just huge. We have a lot of old Terroir in the collection, and every vintage Laiteron is good. Even a bad vintage Laiteron, it's like les Savigny, les Lavières. This Terroir, it's exceptional for that. Les Marconnais, it's very different. Les Marconnais, you are more in the north position. It's a little more close from the highway, separate les Marconnais for Beaune to Savigny-les-Beaunes. Alors, les Marconnais terroir, it's the same altitude as Laiteron, same exposure, it's east facing. But the soil, it's so different. It's yellow and white marl. It's very difficult in this place to plug the soil, to cultivate the soil. And it's a little more deeper on the soil, it's more fresh, it keeps the damp. And that's why generally I finish the harvest with les Marconnais. In average, you have perhaps 5 to 10 days, it depends on the vintage, to reach a perfect maturity between Laiteron and les Marconnais. It's more later. Alors, les Marconnais, it's totally different. Les Marconnais, it's more a powerful wine. The color, it's more intense, it's more black color. You have more fruitiness on the nose, but black on fresh fruit with black currant, blueberries notes. And sometimes if you organize a blind tasting, you could confuse les Marconnais with a Côte de Nuit because of the freshness and the purity of the black fruit. The tannin is more present. Les Marconnais, it's a little more masculine wine. Les Terroir, it's really more racy and elegant.
So welcome back actually to the Beaune Premier Cru towards the end with our famous monopole, the Clos Saint-Landry. But maybe before we jump into that, two words about the position that the Bouchard House has in the Beaune Premier Cru area with many different hectares. Do you want to just you mentioned Les Grèves, there's the Clos de la Mousse, which is our monopole as well, and of course our famous Beaune du Château, who allows to blend 17 villages for the red.
Yeah. No, Beaune Premier Cru. It's the hearth of the Bouchard Père et Fils. And don't forget the Bouchard Père et Fils, just after the French Revolution in 1791, when the property of the church was sold, the family Bouchard have the opportunity to purchase a lot of land in the Beaune Premier Cru, and especially on the best terroir of Beaune Premier Cru has les Grèves, les Terroir, after that les Marconnais, les Clos du Roi, les Avaux, and in totally we have 50 hectares. Bouchard is a major owner of the Beaune Premier Cru area, and only in Beaune Premier Cru. And that is really important. Alors, why Bouchard Père et Fils of the family Bouchard purchased so much in Beaune? Because in the at the beginning of the 20th century, Beaune was really famous, most famous than Côte de Nuit, Gevrey, or Chambol, or like Meursault today. The people speak about just the great wine from Beaune. but not of the other villages was not very well known. And but in Beaune, another fact for me, it's the diversity of the terroir that give a lot of diversity of wine. And for me, if you would like to discover Burgundy, the Pinot Noir from La Bourgogne, and it's an incredible entry level. And for the diversity, the variability, it's impossible to say to me you don't like Bourgogne wine, because between Teron and Marconnet and Claude Lamousse and Grève, you have so much difference, so much different style, and that is the beauty. And a lot of people said you have the same diversity just in Beaune than all the Côte d'Or area. But it's true, there is so many different terroirs of Premier Cru. It's amazing, and I think you have to know more les Beaunes Premier Cru.
So now we're going to travel to another part of the Burgundy, which is Pomer. So before getting into the difference, the Premier Cru domain and the Rugien, maybe like general differences between the Beaune Premier Cru and the Pomer.
Yes, alors in Pomer, Bouchard Fils, we are owner on the Pomer village. We had 6 hectares, and after that we had some very beautiful Premier Cru with les Pomars, les Chanlins, les Pomars, les Combes, and certainly the most famous Premier Cru was les Pomars, les Rugiens, and another one, les Pézerolles. It's very a small one, but I'm not sure you had les Pézerolles in the US.
No, we don't.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's beautiful. Alors, for the Pomer Premier Cru domain, in fact, we choose to blend together les Pomars, les Chanlins, and Pomars, les Combes. It's come from the estate. Alors, just to simplify the offer for the customer, but that's permit for me to play with 2 different style of wine. Les Pomars Combes, you are in the bottom of the appellation. It's a most flat part, and the soil it's rich on clay, red clay, very dense, and in this part, it's a very true Pomer with a lot of structure. The tannins are very present, but it's very powerful on masculine wine. On Pomer les Chanlins, it's more higher. It's east facing. It's a steep slope. It's very difficult for people to walk in this part because you have 30% of slope. It's difficult to plug the soil here, but the soil is very different, and you are very close to the Volnay area, and that's why les Pomars, les Chanlins is more. There is more delicacy. It's more elegant. It's more fresh too. You have more some spicy note and also some the freshness of the berries. And after the vinification, I choose to blend together to create the cuvée Pomer Premier Cru domaine. And I think it's really nice to if you would like to understand les Pomer Premier Cru. Every vintage, it's very consistency. And I think the nose, it's really beautiful, and I adapt the vinification for the Pomer Premier Cru to avoid over extraction, to avoid too much tannin, because a lot of people said Pomer is too strong structure, or it need 10, 20 years. It's not true. In Pomer, I increase the percentage of whole cluster. I reduce the time of the maceration. It's very careful maceration, but the tannin, I research a very delicate tannin with more. I prefer the pleasure immediate, and you could take an immediate pleasure with the Pomer Premier Cru domaine. Les Rugiens, alors Pomer les Rugiens. If you remember, it's one of the first plots that the Bouchard family purchased in 1775. Why? because it's certainly one of the best places for the Pomer lérugien. And today we consider only one Grand, if there was a Grand Cru in Pomer, it would be the Pomer lérugien. It's the greatest premier cru from Pomer. There is a discussion in Burgundy between les Pomer duo and les Ruggiens duo et les Ruggiens du Pas. Alors, Bouchard, we are situated in the Ruggiens duo, just in the top of the hillock. It's a very nice exposure. The soil, the specificity of les Pomer lérugien, it's come from the iron. Because the soil is a red clay rich in iron, and that gives the powerful, the structure and the length in the mouth. And les Pomer Ruggiens, in fact, in the upper part, at the beginning you have 50-60 centimeters of white marl, and after it's a really dense red clay rich in iron, and that gives the powerful. Alors, it's a difficult plot to plug the soil, to cultivate more during the summer, because the soil, it's like the stone. But the soil keeps the damp, and these parts, it's very rare that this vineyard suffers the drought, and that's permit to me to reach really carefully and very nice maturity. And generally I finish the harvest in Côte de Beaune with les Ruggiens, because this plot need more time to have a great expression of les Ruggiens. Alors, les Ruggiens, for me, it's like Le Corton. It's a powerful wine. You have some earthy note, and this wine need a little more time to aging, but the aging potential it's just huge. We adapt during the aging in barrel to have more soft and more delicate tannin. And no, les Ruggiens, it's definitively a great terroir.
Great. Thank you very much, Frédéric. I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions, please feel free to write in the chat. We can go into the questions along, or at the end, there will be a little bit of time left for Q&A. After Pomer, we're coming back to the Côte de Beaune and getting into the white Clos Saint-Landry. First of all, do you want to explain why, in the tasting order, we at Bouchard, we always start with the red wines and comes to the white next?
Yeah, it's a tradition for the tasting. If you come to the chateau in Beaune, to Bouchard, we always starting with the Pinot Noir, and we finish with the Chardonnay. Simply because the Pinot Noir, we consider Pinot Noir has a very racy wine, delicate, and the Chardonnay, it's more powerful. And generally to Bouchard, we finish with les Grands Crus, has les Corton Charlemagne, les Chevaliers, les Montrachet. And after a Montrachet, the Montrachet, it's so powerful, you have so much minerality, you can't drink a red wine after. That's why the good order for us, it's a red wine with a Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, and after we finish with the white.
The white, thank you. So with 2020, would you say that this is a more of a white or a red vintage?
Alors, for me, I think 2020 it's a huge vintage for the white. I'm really astonished by that, because the year was so warm, so dry, but finally the Chardonnay do not suffer of the drought. He suffer less than the Pinot Noir. We don't know, it's difficult to explain. We do not know exactly why, but that's happened. And the balance of the 2020 of Chardonnay, it's just great. And honestly, I consider today it will be the vintage for the last 20 years, better for me than 14, because the balance is just perfect. The purity and the rest, it's very respectful of each terroir. The definition is just incredible. If you taste a Perrier, you taste a Genevière, you taste a Goutte d'Or, it's a huge difference between each terroir. And in fact, in 2020, you have a good maturity, but not a high maturity. The percentage of alcohol, it's less than the last vintages. It's in average, it's 13.5 maximum. But we had a lot of acidity, and mainly from the malic and tartaric acid, because there was a lot of milrandage in 2020. Certainly because during the flowering period, there is just a small stress. But after that, this vintage was, for me, it's just a huge vintage for today and for the future. I think it's better than 14 because you have a true pleasure of the expression today. And I think the aging potential is great because the acidity, because the saltiness and the minerality in the mouth. And 14 was a great vintage, but it was a very focused and more tight. It was built for the future. But with 2020, you could have an immediate pleasure, and I'm sure a great pleasure, and mostly on the future.
So there's a question, and that makes sense to talk about this now, but it would be great. Two questions. One is like, which vintage is it reminiscent? Another vintage that come to mind that it's reminiscent of?
It's difficult. For me, you have perhaps the open nose. It's very expressive, and the precision of the terroir, like 05. But in the mouth, it's definitively the precision with the acidity and the minerality of 14.
Okay. And so another question about, we have now, in the United States for last, year, 2 years, 17s and 18s, and we have more that are finally coming. Can you how would you position 2020 versus the 17 and the 18?
It's certainly 2020 will be better than the two last vintage, but 17 and 18 was also a beautiful vintage. But for 18, it was a little, the style of the wine for me, it's more warm, more appealing, a little more round, with more creamy note, and with a lot of expression of the nose. And I think honestly, it's a great vintage to take pleasure now for the next 5 years. 17, it's a little more classic. You have more acidity. Today, it's a little more precise. And if people prefer precision, prefer a little more acidity, they certainly will prefer the 17. If the people prefer round, appealing, more creamy, he will prefer the 18. But it's two beautiful vintages. We are lucky, but because if you regard the last 10 years, it's rare to have a bad vintage. And we cross finger for you would like we continue like that.
Yes, I see a question actually related to the quantities, which has been a big topic, and unfortunately in the last year, 19 was limited, 17 were okay, but 2020, to answer the question, is there will not be more wines available. I mean, obviously, this is a broad question. We have many different SKUs. The wines we're talking about today have, a little bit more availability than we had in the past, but that doesn't apply for, all of the wines. So that would be a good segue maybe to talk about yields, just to give a sense of like what were the yields in 2020 compared to 19 and potentially 18 and 17.
In fact, 18 was the last normal yield we had on the estate. In 19, with the drought and hydric stress, and mainly during the flowering period, we had a lot of milrandage. And the average yield for the 19, it's less 40%. 20 was the same thing. In 20, I produce in average for the Pinot Noir 28 hectoliter per hectare. It's less than 19. 19 was 29 or 30 hectoliter per hectare. For the white in 19, it's the same thing. It's a very small quantity. 20 is just a little better. I produce 35 to 38 hectoliter per hectare. It's almost normal year. And 21, it's just a catastrophe because we lost 80% and I produce less than 10 hectoliter per hectare. It's a quarter of a normal year.
This is so a lot of pressure on the quantities, unfortunately, yeah. And we're all.
If you come to the, I was this morning with a collector, a friend of Bouchard House, and we taste together on the barrel. And when he see the cellar, for him it was incredible because the cellar is totally empty.
So it's a little early, we know, for 2022, but how is it looking like so far?
Alors, today it's not so bad. We had to be prudent. But the weather is good.
No frost so far, not much.
No, we had some 2 weekends with a very cold temperature during the night. It was very stressful, but finally it was less humid than 21. And I think we do not lost a lot, perhaps 10%. We don't know exactly. There was a stress, but we do not lost a lot of quantity, but it's too soon to say something. Today the weather is very beautiful, a little too dry. It's like 2020. For the beginning, we had not enough water from the winter, but the weather condition is good. Today is good, and I cross finger to have a beautiful vintage in quantity and quality.
Yes, we are all crossing all of our fingers. Thank you, Frédéric. So let's come back to the Côte de Beaune and the Clos Saint-Landry. And I love, showing maps because this is very easy to spot. It's that little white plot of Chardonnay, a yellow plot in the middle of that ocean of Pinot Noir. So can you tell us a little bit about the Clos Saint-Landry?
Yeah. Alors, firstly, as you can see, the white in Beaune Premier Cru is rare. And the Clos Saint-Landry, it's really special for that because since the 13th century, we found the first trace of plantation of Chardonnay in Beaune Premier Cru in this place, in Clos Saint-Landry. And in fact, the name it's come from because it was a property of the Cistercian monk, l'Abbé de Mézières. And this monk decided to plant Chardonnay, white varieties in this place because of the nature of the soil. The nature of the soil, it's yellow and white marl, and it's perfect for the Chardonnay. And all around, it's more clay, and the clay on the limestone is better for the Pinot Noir. And the Cistercian monk have the ability, have his knowledge to decide to plant Chardonnay just in this place. And that is unique. And that's why Bouchard House, just after the revolution in 1791, they decided to purchase this plot because even in this time, it was unique. And the definition of the Clos Saint-Landry, it's a very great Premier Cru for the white. It's a flat part. The maturity arrived more sooner than the other part of Beaune. That's why I start every vintage to pick very early les Chardonnays du Clos Saint-Landry to keep the freshness, the purity. After that, for me, the style of the Clos Saint-Landry, it's really an appealing nose, a lot of dried fruit, almond, and some apricot nose. It's very expressive, and when you press the grapes, you could compare with les Morceaux Goutte d'Or because it's the same thing. A lot of expression of the fruit, a lot of apricot on some exotic nose. And after that, in the mouth, it's very. You have the dried fruit and a lot of charming and creamy notes. It's more. It's really appealing. A little more generous. than the other Beaune Premier Cru. And I think it's a very beautiful Premier Cru in Beaune.
Thank you, Frédéric. The last wine that we are going to look at is Meursault Genévrière. So this is, there is here a fantastic story as well, like a remarkable position that the Bouchard house has with ownership over 20 hectares. So a lot of diversity in that terroir and appellation as well.
Yes, it is true. And certainly Bouchard, it's after Beaune, Bouchard is a major owner in the Meursault Premier Cru and Meursault Village. And thanks a lot to Joseph Henriot, who continued to purchase vineyard in 1995. But it's rare to have and certainly only perhaps the Dominique Lafond and Bouchard Père-Fils could organize a tasting with les Bouchers, les Port-Ruzeau, les Gouttes d'Or, les Charmes, les Genévrières, and les Perrières. That is absolutely unique. And when you taste all these different Premier Cru, you could understand the beauty of Meursault appellation as a diversity. And alors les Meursault Genévrières, the situation for Bouchard Père-Fils, it's really perfect. We have just in the upper part of the appellation, les Genévrières du dessus. And in totally, we have 2 hectares, and in fact, it's 2 different plots. The first one, we are in the heart of the appellation, in the middle of the slope. It's a perfect location. And we had 1 hectare.6. And in this part, for me, it's a true Genévrière. It's a very gold color, a lot of dried fruit on the nose of the butternut and on the bread. It's more generous and large in the mouth. And we are lucky because we have a second plot. It's more higher than the first one. And the second plot, the soil, it's a little more different. It's more chalky soil. And there is, in this part, the maturity arrives a little more later. And in this part, there is more minerality on the citrus note, the green citrus. And after the aging in barrel, I blend the 2 plots together to create the cuvée Meursault Genévrière. And that's permit to have a very good balance for the Genévrière. It's not so large, it's not too fat. It's really, really elegant with a lot of floral note. And we have just bottling the 2020 the last week. And honestly, the Genévrière 20, it's so beautiful. You have the lime trees, the flower, the dried fruit in the mouth. It's very perfect.
Thank you, Frédéric. Any questions? So we have a few more minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free. I have a few announcements of information to share. I mean, where do we go from there? There are like also other wines. So a few things. You should have received before the seminar a link to a digital booklet, which is dedicated, if you can see, dedicated to our 2020 vintage. There's a print copy. If you want one of those, please reach out to your MDHA contact. The booklet is also available on our website, which I just want to give you a quick show you a quick thing here. So our website, you can find in the sales tool the digital booklet. We can also find the reviews and the recap. Bouchard Père-Fils vintage 2020 was like highly acclaimed, and you had a recap of those not the scores, but the overall assessment by the key publications in there. And we also offer, you can see this is our website, you have here MDH Academy, which is an online education platform that we have developed, and that if you have not joined or taken classes yet, please feel free to join. We offer an overview of Burgundy, an overview of Bouchard, of William Febvre, as well as a dedicated module to Merlot. So you can dig deeper into those 6 Premier Cru that we own, as well as the other terroirs of Merlot. And with that, we'll conclude our. Stop sharing. Let me see if we have another question. Otherwise, we can conclude that introduction of the Vintage 2020. This webinar was recorded. We will put it on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and review the introduction, the comments on the wine, you'll be able to do that. We will send a follow-up email. And Alison just posted the link actually in the webinar. Frédéric, thank you very much for being with us today. I wish you a good end of day. It's late already in France. And for the rest of the audience, I see you again in 15 minutes with Didier Séguier, who will join from William Febvre.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bonne soirée. Merci à tous.